Hello and welcome to Unplugged, an IIoT podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of industrial Internet of Things and automation. I'm your host, Phil Seboa.
G'day, Phil, and hello, everyone. My name is Ed Fuentes. Phil, very excited about these discussions we're going to have today. As you know, we're proponents of that ITOT gap and doing work in that space. And one technology we've seen really resonate with a lot of customers, a lot of people is Node-RED, and taking that Node-RED to the next level, being FlowFuse and what it can do. We're very excited to have with us a technical lead in this space, someone who knows the industry, understands the challenges, and looking forward to this conversation with Kristopher Sandoval. Kristopher, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to talk about all this.
We are actually going to have a bit of a interesting spin on today's episode because we're going to have really a split between three different significant areas of the application. So we're going to really tackle the application gap. Why does FlowFuse Expert exist? The second gap will be talking about how the tools are going to be used in practice on the shop floor. And then how do we scale these types of applications? So check out these next episodes because they're going to be a really interesting deep dive into FlowFuse Expert. Kristopher, maybe you can do a bit of an introduction to yourself as technical lead.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Kristopher Sandoval. I am the developer advocate relations person at FlowFuse. I do a little bit of everything. This is a really interesting space. It requires someone who can sort of lead the technical discussion, but also someone who can go do events or help with marketing or, write a lot of documentation. And so this is a really, really interesting space. For me, I came into the industry on the IT side. So I'm very, very familiar with all of the sort of trappings of that side of things. And not just the benefits that brings, but also the frustrations that brings to people who are actually on the line that are working with configurations, working with getting systems running. And so I have a quite unique sort of perspective on a lot of this just by virtue of having had the career I've had. And yeah, I love advocating for FlowFuse and for what we're trying to do. And I'm super excited to dive in.
That's a great intro, Kristopher. Thanks very much for sharing that. Let's dive into FlowFuse Expert. Actually, you mentioned that a few times. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
Why does it matter?
Yeah, so FlowFuse Expert is an AI-enhanced solution that is built into FlowFuse itself. So if you look at the sort of the product offering that we came from, when all of this started off, we had Node-RED, and Node-RED is this fantastic visual sort of solution for building applications, working with applications. But the problem is, as powerful as that thing is, and it is very powerful, when you start trying to scale that to more than one instance, or when you start, working with multiple people in the loop, and then you have to start worrying about rights management and then security and all these other things, the next sort of logical step from that was FlowFuse. And FlowFuse is, the management plane, yes, of all the Node-RED things, but on top of that, it is the granular role-based access control and the rights management over the entire team, the ability to do pipeline deployments, all these things. Coming from that, there's then this, question, which is, okay, if FlowFuse is sort of the natural evolution of Node-RED, and sort of in the industrial mind, the Node-RED sort of paradigm is the evolution of taking, building applications and ladder logic and doing these things to something that is visual and accessible. If Node-RED is the evolution of that, and then FlowFuse is the evolution of that, what is the evolution of FlowFuse and what is the evolution of the industry as a larger corpus of things? The answer that we came away with was FlowFuse Expert. And it's this idea of, not a replacement. This isn't replacing operators. It's not, sort of like you don't have to hire an OT team anymore. You can, just get this AI to do it. It's not that at all. What it is taking you from I have a problem to I have a solution as fast as possible, and then making that more maintainable, making it more understandable, and making it more iterable. And we'll get into, what each sort of sub process of FlowFuse Expert looks like, but I'll give you a couple examples that I use quite actively. You can develop something like an OEE dashboard in FlowFuse itself. You can have the expert develop that for you agentically. And then you can say, okay, well, I want all the colors updated, or I want to start, calling this API, or I need to integrate this other solution as like a sub application. What used to be a 10 or 20-hour process of discovering the documentation, building that in, finding how they conflict, finding how they support each other, merging rights, merging API calls, and then figuring out how to cache that and going through all these, steps. All of that can be compressed to maybe an hour with FlowFuse Expert, and asking it really pointed questions of, hey, can you give me this documentation for this thing? Can you build an example flow that, gets me 90% of the way? Can you detect my problem? Or, maybe if you're working with somebody, this person developed the flow. I have no idea what's going on. Can you explain it to me? The expert can fill all of those gaps and compress that time in such a way that you don't have to worry about boilerplate. You don't have to worry about wasted time searching for documentation. It is the best way I can summarize it is it makes your life better, which is the hope. I think that is sort of the summation of what I would say. Node-RED was the evolution of making the developing better. FlowFuse is the iteration of making the management better. And then FlowFuse Expert is just making it better, period.
Yeah, it sounds like it's your co-pilot or your assistant or your, expert that you can leverage to start building out these, complex applications and just speeding up that development process by abstracting the technical implementation stage out of the way.
Exactly.
Basically get that out of the way, right?
Yeah, and the best part about it is it's the building of it, but it's also the maintainability of it. You can use it to proactively find, gaps in your application or broken code. It can sort of be your not just your co-pilot in terms of development, but in terms of maintainability, in terms of extensibility. And there's also all these little processes that OT people are very familiar with this. There's all these little processes that are human processes only because there is no automation solution for it. It is generating a handoff report for somebody at the end of a shift, and you have to write down every little thing that's gone wrong during that shift and all the systems that are maybe deviating a little bit. And you can have the automation sort of give you a checklist of those things, but you still have to generate the report, and that takes time and effort. And using something like FlowFuse Expert, you can just have it create that, or you can have it, proactively look into a code base to find problems, or if an API call is not working, instead of having to go through all the documentation and parse that and figure it out, you could just feed it the documentation and say, hey, please help me. What am I doing wrong here? And that's kind of what I was getting at in terms of it's just making it better is any process that you can think of that you get frustrated with. And I know this sounds very salesman-y, so I really do suggest people go try it for themselves. Any problem that you think, man, there's got to be a better way to do this, that is why we developed FlowFuse Expert, so that there actually is a better way to do that.
Yeah, I think there's a really, high value point there when, I know from experience where you've been writing code for so long or you've been in the weeds of it for so long and you need that third party to come in and just have an objective advisor type overview, have a look at your code, have a look at the process, and try and highlight those things that you miss when you're in the weeds of it.
Yeah. And there's also just a lot of circumstances where you're never going to be able to abstract away the human cost of the thing. So, if you have one person who's a specialist in a particular piece of their application and a particular piece of their factory flow, you could hire 3 or 4 additional people, but then you have to train those people, and then you have to have the knowledge shared, and you have all these additional steps that ultimately gets us to the point where you really only have 1 or 2 people a shift who are the subject matter expert on the thing. And, the FlowFuse expert answer there is, well, they can be the expert, but don't make them do all the rote things. Don't make them do the things that are really just wasting their time. Because wouldn't it be better if you could have your lead architect actually be able to go architect instead of having to write the same report that they write every single day that takes 30 minutes of their day? That to us seems like a foolish waste of time. And so, when you look at FlowFuse Expert, I think that the answer is, how can we make your life better in practical, realistic terms? Not just throwing an AI at a problem and hoping that it makes it better, but what is the practical thing that gives you more dollars in your pocket, more hours in your day, and more sanity in your brain? That is the whole intent here.
That exists, you mentioned.
Yeah, so
between having that. Go, Phil. Sorry, you're talking about that gap there, Kristopher. That from the technical side, from the software, or how the FlowFuse Expert takes the person from where they are at to where they need to be with that information. How's that trip take like? Well, what's that expert knowledge need to adopt or absorb to give them real value?
Yeah, so there's a few things. First of all, there's the things that are just very sort of hardwired into the system. So FlowFuse Expert is built with MCP connectivity, and anyone who's not familiar with MCP, that's Model Context Protocol. It's basically this open standard that allows you to provide context to the model itself. And so we do use MCP to connect to all of our documentation, all of the community generated documentation for community nodes. And so there's that part of the problem, which is, okay, you have all this buried knowledge, and instead of requiring someone to go Google the catalog library or click through in the palette manager and then read 5 pages of documentation, and then doing that over 20 nodes to figure out the one thing that they've done that's wrong, that's, sort of the one piece of it. The other piece of it is this sort of constant problem we've always had, which is tribal knowledge. And it is the thing where the person, is developing the code, and they walk away from it and they're, pressed for time, or they just need to get the thing working, and then you don't end up with documentation. What FlowFuse Expert on that side of things does is it allows you to generate the documentation in situ. So as you're developing the thing, you can ask the expert to actually make the documentation for you, and you can go through it and validate it. But it also allows you to generate sort of on-demand documentation. So in FlowFuse Expert, you can highlight the palette, you can highlight the nodes and say, can you explain to me what this is doing, how this is working, what context is calling, is this going out to other instances, or is this all local? You can have it summarize all of that for you. And so that's sort of, on the one hand, you have the hardwired stuff, and then you have the tribal knowledge. The other piece of that is just sort of democratizing development and access. There's a lot of knowledge that people have. When you build these applications, they're often built for a very specific purpose by a very specific person. And if that person goes on vacation, or is no longer with the company, or moves on to something else, and now you have a whole team who has to maintain that thing, you then have to you either have to create a brand new application, which is just a secondary waste of time, or you have to relearn this first application. And the reason you have to do that is because that knowledge is not even just tribal, it's individual. And there's no way to get that knowledge, to get that context, to get that insight. And so with FlowFuse Expert, there's not only the MCP side of it, which is the written stuff, and the tribal knowledge, which is the generated stuff, there's also all the meta-contextual data that goes into the system. And so every node has an ID, there's descriptions for that, there's documentation for that, you can read the wires between the nodes, you can read the flows and context. And so if you have, an application that you develop, and then you leave the room, and you ask someone who's never seen that application to come in, what would take a 40-hour process to get up and running now is like a 5-minute process. And the number of times that I've handed a flow to somebody, or an application to somebody inside of FlowFuse, and said, hey, I need you to take this and put this on 10 other devices. Can you do that? They can now do that in a handful of minutes instead of hours and hours and hours, because the knowledge isn't just in my brain. It's now documented, but also sort of self-defining and self-documenting.
Yeah, it's definitely something that is going to, accelerate that process of handover between, people on the shop floor. Why did you build this? What is it connected to? How can we action it? How can we move it on? Asking the questions just became a lot easier as well, and faster. That's kind of the crux of everything, right? Is that, we can start building these applications out, really quickly.
Yeah. I think faster, but also because this is something that often comes up when we talk about AI. AI often comes with this trade-off that people have in their minds of faster but lower quality. That yes, you can create a painting, but it's not going to be a Monet. Yes, you can create a song, but it's not going to be, for me, it'd be Mars Volta, but for anybody, like, it's not going to be that thing, right? And so there is this part of it when you start talking about AI of people, okay, industrial systems, I don't want to run AI on it, it's going to be worse. But the whole way that FlowFuse Expert works is it takes all these processes, ensures that there's a human in the loop. Everything is triggered by a human. Humans interact with it constantly. Things just don't happen unless you want them to happen. And because of that, you get this speed, which is certainly a part of it, but you also get this quality, because you can create the thing and you can say, hey, before I even deploy this, can you tell me, does this make sense? Can you tell me, is this, in terms of modalities, is this in line with the way that we've developed in the past versus the way that we have now? Is there any security concerns here? The number of times that I've pulled in a flow from the community and they've said, hey, this is broken. Can you take a look at it? When I've taken a look at that in the past, it has been hours and hours and hours and trying to figure out, well, okay, why is this person storing this in global context? I don't understand what they're doing until it finally clicks. I'm like, oh, okay, they're doing cache and reply. Now I understand what they're doing. But they're doing it in a really insecure way. So let me suggest this. That used to take like 5 or 10 hours. Now I can pull that in, fix the security issue, fix the flow in like 10 minutes. And in that case, you get that speed, but you also get the quality and you get the dependability. So it is sort of like all the things that you would want out of it. It kind of feels like Christmas morning. And again, I know that sounds salesman-y. It's all the things that I would want out of it. It is secure, it's fast, it's promising. It makes me feel better about my code because I'm not the best coder in the world. So it's good to be able to process those things. Like, can you validate that this makes sense? It's all of those things in a solution that doesn't feel like it's just AI for the sake of AI.
And I suppose that's the difference here, Kristopher, is that idea that we're seeing an uptake of people starting to use chat models or LLMs in their businesses, especially the OT layer now, looking at what value it delivers, what it can bring. In your case with Expert, is it a skill that's driven on their side of the firewall? How is it, like you mentioned before about it's kept in its own domain, it's secure, as compared to, let's say, other LLMs? What's the main differences here that you're seeing people moving towards Expert as compared to using a similar, another LLM?
Yeah, so the core problem with AI when it comes to industrial systems is that industrial systems aren't general, they're specific. Every problem that you have in a factory is a specific problem that is specific to your deployment, that is specific to your code base, the people who have developed it, and then just specific to industry as a whole. There's lots of things. If you talk to the average OT engineer or even the average IT person in industry, the things that we have in our minds when we leave this job or if we were to go to a different industry, they don't translate. They're not things that anybody in the normal, like if I go to the library and pick 10 people out of the area, they're not going to care about UNS. They're not going to understand SCADA. They're not going to understand any modeling systems. It's just not a thing that they're going to get. And so when you start applying generalized models, so something, just like a sort of untrained black box open AI, just send to their API sort of thing. The problem with that is you're taking a very, very generalized model and you're applying it to very specialized domains of expertise and very specialized problems in general. And you'll see, and I suggest everyone do this, if you're on FlowFuse, go to your AI solution of choice, copy your flow and hand it to it and ask it to find a problem or to solve an issue. It'll come back with things that are maybe 75%, 80%, but it also make a lot of assumptions. It'll look at the way that you develop the thing. It'll say, oh, well, you don't want to do that. That doesn't make sense. And then you'll have that moment where you're like, well, no, because I'm pulling off of some Rios and I have limited swap space and there's these limitations. That is the way I have to do it. I understand to you, LLM running in an Amazon data center somewhere, I understand to you that it doesn't make sense. But in the reality of my situation, it makes total sense. And so when you look at the way that FlowFuse Expert is deployed, because it has all, not just the sort of trained intelligence that we have, and then the MCP documentation that I was talking about, it also has all of that meta-contextual information that I was referring to. It can look at all of the state of your application, the way it was developed, the history of your snapshots, what you've imported, what you've deleted, what you've changed. And it can say, okay, in this particular situation, this may not be the best practice in a general situation. In this specialized situation, absolutely is the best practice. This is the way it had to have been developed because I can see it's connected to all of these systems. I can see what it's trying to do with all these other instances. And so I know that, like, yes, there's some trade-offs here, but that is what the OT story is, right? It's all trade-offs to make this thing work. I always make the sort of pithy joke that computers are always something we struggle with because we tricked rocks into thinking. And that is sort of like, that's the industrial reality is we tricked rocks into thinking. And so it's always going to be a struggle to get it to do what we want. The difference is with FlowFuse Expert, it understands that. It's not coming out at it from the outside. It's coming at it from the inside, the calls inside the house, for lack of better terms. And it understands the full context of what you're doing. And so it gives really actionable, direct insight, not just in the generality, but in the specificity of your solution and your actual build play.
Okay. So where is FlowFuse Expert able to be deployed?
Yeah. So FlowFuse Expert is on the cloud. It is on edge devices. You can roll it out there. We have a version that you can roll out on Node-RED through an open source community plugin. Basically, anywhere that FlowFuse is, you can run it. You can, I think for remote instances, you have it, I believe you have it by default. But yeah, it is super flexible. It can run anywhere because of the way that we built it. To be very transparent, FlowFuse Expert runs on the FlowFuse platform, which is nice because we trust our platform, so we run it on our platform. And so because of that, there's no sort of weirdness where, a lot of other solutions, you have this thing that is sort of part of the core product, but not. It lives on the outskirts somewhere and it phones to some other server and does some other thing. This is processed internally. This is something that connects to internal documentation and internal resources. It is a native embedded application, which is a big reason why it is, in my opinion, so much better than using something like ChatGPT. Because yes, you can connect ChatGPT, through connectors, or you could do some sort of it. Like if you have local Node-RED instances, in theory, you can provide it with an MCP connector or skill or something. But it's still this layer of abstraction. And I think we are all aware in the industrial space, every layer of abstraction you put in there, that little bit of complexity, which seems like nothing today, ultimately ends up being the breaking factor down the road. And then something changes, they update something about the model, and then all of a sudden, everything that was green lights all the way down on your screen, well, not anymore. It'd be nice if it was, but it's not anymore. That sort of thing doesn't happen with the Expert.
And how does someone start with Expert? What's the first step that you see or recommend people to do, and how quickly? And I know it's a bit funny to say that because people want fast time to value or want to go from, because we talk about the benefits we see, but they don't realize that there is a cost at the beginning to implement it. Or what's that look like?
Yeah, so the easiest thing to get started with Expert, the best part about it is it's already on the instances. So in the upper left corner, there's a little button you can click. That'll open it. If you're looking at your management plane on flowfuse.com, there's a little square that says Expert. You can click that. There's also another button that says Explain. If you highlight anything, you can click that. I think really the easiest way to get started for the average person, if you just go into an instance, it could be a brand new instance, pull in an MQTT feed or OPC UA or something, bring in any data source, even a generated data source, it doesn't matter. And go to the upper left, click that little button for Expert, and just ask it, hey, build me a dashboard for this. And you'll get the sense of how quickly it can do that. You also get a sense of where the gap still exists, right? Because there are some places where we're very like, we can build the dashboard, but how you want to color it, we're not going to assume that you want a bright blue dashboard or a purple dashboard or whatever. If you tell the Expert that you want it that way, then it'll do it that way. So just start playing around with it. Ask it for a very specific solution for your specific problem and see what it can do. And that, I think once you start using it, you'll start almost thinking about it like you're sitting with somebody else in the room that you can turn to and say, hey, man, I don't want to do this. You take it. Like, I don't want to do this boring connector. I've already connected 15 Rios today. I don't want to do that. Can you, figure out the end on feed for it? It's not anything I want to deal with. And, start experimenting with those pieces that you'd rather offload. And then once you're comfortable with that, you can start to see, okay, well, if I can trust it with the stack lights, then maybe I can trust it with the temp sense. And if I trust it with temp sense, then maybe vibration is the next thing. And, you start going down this road, and then all of a sudden you're using Expert to build everything. And you're like, wow, this is way better than the way I was doing it. But I totally understand it does take those first steps to get people in and to start seeing like the promise of what this can actually do, which is quite a bit.
Wow. I mean, that's like pretty eye-opening and a great foundation for really getting started with FlowFuse Expert. I think in the next episode, we're going to go deeper into the practical use of real operation and go into some real use cases. So we'll see you on the next episode.
Looking forward to that, Phil. Looking forward to that demo because I think there's some value here. Kristopher, I hope you don't mind. Would love to see this in action. Maybe on our next episode too, Phil. What do you think?
Absolutely.